To Hello everyone, welcome back. We have another episode of vocal technique for you guys. It's been a while since my last one. A lot of things have happened since then. I personally have been dealing with a relocation, bit of a last minute spontaneous move. I'm currently in Berlin doing 2 productions simultaneously. We've had a famous actor lose his Oscar because he spoke out against opera and ballet. We also saw a tremendous support of opera and ballet worldwide and come together against ideas such as opera and ballet being an ancient dying art form, which could interestingly be another topic to discuss in another video. Opera and ballet were mentioned, even though jokingly, but we're still mentioned on the Oscars. And I don't know if it's just me, but I'm seeing a wide variety of people, singers, teachers starting to come out of their so-called shells and putting out content involving vocal technique, involving the opera industry, singing, and a lot of it is pretty good information. So it's 2026 and a lot is happening for opera, which is a comforting thought. So the topic of today that this video will revolve around is something that has come up a lot in my teaching, is something that has come up a lot through just conversations, things that I also tend to see with other singers, and even temptations that I myself have to fight against. This idea of bracing before a high note, or bracing before any singing at all, and why that is detrimental to your singing and to free up the top. I think a lot of this happens almost subconsciously. And also the terminology is a little bit to blame here. So for example, we have a phrase like recondita armonia from the opera Tosca. We get to the end of the aria and we have this big climactic high B flat in which the character Cavaradossi sings the name Tosca. You have quite a big dense wall of orchestral instrumentation happening at the same time that you're singing this B flat. And so a lot of the things that are going through our head right before we sing it tend to emulate this idea of bracing, of engaging, of supporting. And I'm going to tell you why these words perhaps are not helping you, even though we hear them all the time being circulated in master classes in a teaching setting. Breath support, engaging your core. And I'm not directly attacking the people that are saying these things, absolutely not, because they're trying to get across the right information. It's just the wording, the connection that subconsciously your mind makes to these words. So if I think of the ending of that aria, Tosca sei tu. If before I sing this note, I start to think brace, I start to think engaging the core, engaging perhaps or supporting through the jaw, locking, I already start to feel a locking motion. Very grunty, very which is the opposite effect of what we want. We are interrupting the process of the vocal cords stretching and thinning through the tilt and an open throat position. If anything, we are constricting. Anytime you think flexing your abdominals or pushing anything out, and you can try this at home right now, that, as if you were a bodybuilder showcasing your abs to people and you're flexing your abs, there is a direct effect to the throat, closing, grunting. We don't want that for singing. Yes, there is chord closure in which the vocal cords adduct, come together, but it's not nearly as tensionful as what I'm demonstrating, which is a brace position. The thing is that the word breath support, when I think of support, and perhaps for many of you at home, you might agree with this, I'm literally thinking, or I picture a man doing this, supporting a weight, like a weightlifter. I'm supporting, I'm a pillar or a column that's supporting. You know, we have a bridge that has beams of support that support the weight. But all these things are contradictory to the idea of actual appoggio. Engagement of the core makes me think, okay, flex the abs, push out. None of these were related to the old traditional bel canto school of singing. Actually, appoggio does not even mean support. The word support in Italian is sostenere. If I'm trying to say I want to support you, voglio supportarti. Support this weight. Sostenere questo peso. But the word appoggiarsi, which is the verb of appoggio or appoggiare, means to lean, which is different. I know this is dumb because it's a terminology thing, but it does change your mental approach to something, which often than not is the first thing that happens before the physical process begins. The mind comes first. So when I'm thinking now I'm leaning into the note, into my singing, it no longer becomes this picture or the brace picture, and it becomes more of how I'm leaning into the couch. I'm putting my weight on something else, which is totally opposite of picking up weight and supporting the weight. It's getting it off of me so that something else can take it. I'm squatting, this is me bracing, and then I'm finally putting the weight on the rack so it's off of me. I'm leaning the weight somewhere else. So I can find release and get rid of it. And this is why I talk so much about the idea of sighing or moaning, which is practically a sigh with adduction, right? This idea, or this boisterous yawn, this declamatory yawn, not scream, not grunt. A couple of things happen when we shift our perception of singing to this. First of all, nothing is being tensed here. Nothing's being flexed or pushed. Therefore, there's no connection to this blocking. As soon as we flex anything, the vocal tract becomes as a sphincter and completely closes to not allow any air to come out at all, which is the bracing idea. The cords become thick. They become like a shut door. We don't want that. There always needs to be some stretchability, flexibility in the sound. And as I speak, you can notice the quality of my voice, how that's changed. And it sounds a little bit like a dummy, or a little bit of how you speak when you're yawning and someone is asking you a question. Yeah, it's over there. This is aiding the idea of stretching and thinning the vocal cords as we ascend, and the reverse happens as we descend. We are using more of this cricothyroid, and here comes the word again, engagement, which is not engagement. It's just the cricothyroid doing its job. We're allowing that to happen. We're on the tilt, the laryngeal tilt, in which the larynx physically comes forward and tilts, changes the quality of sound. So there's more head voice. It sounds more hollow. And now, in that position, I need to find adduction without closing the throat. I open the vocal tract. I elongate it by thinking of that U valvula, that and now I need to find adduction. And now allowing the air to be released, vibrate. So bracing happens in a number of ways. We can start to brace in our jaw, right? We have this big note coming up. We have the climactic piece of the aria coming up. Here we come. Here it's building up to it. And we are following the buildup. Where we want to do the opposite. If anything, we want to go, So the brace can start to begin in the jaw, especially for a lot of you who have jaw tension issues, TMJ. You sleep perhaps on your stomach and your jaw is getting the front of it and you wake up with a very stiff jaw. And it becomes a domino effect, right? The tongue also starts to get tense, especially the root, which is one of the biggest blockage for high notes there is, tensing the root of the tongue. And then slowly, as you try to open, which you think you're doing the right thing, that's the worst part of it. You think you're doing the right thing, I'm gonna open more, but if your jaw is locked, your tongue is locked, you start to swallow the tongue too. And it starts to become stiff. There's no more flexibility. You feel like a rock. Then the domino effect continues. You have the rib cage being locked too. The ribs, the intercostals, which are supposed to expand and slowly contract. As we breathe, the more tense we get, the more rigid that movement becomes, and we can't take a full breath. So we're starting to take shallow breaths. And then finally, the abdominal freeze or the abdominal lock, which also continues to worsen the process of stretching and thinning the cords, and you have a locked machine, like two gears that are trying to move, but they can't. There is a blockage. You're trying to ascend, but you're doing everything the opposite of the process that allows you to ascend. Funny enough, and I've said this in other videos, people with no vocal training tend to let go and sort of lean the voice, their sound, in settings that completely have nothing to do with singing. And you see it all the time at parties, in a group setting, or in theme parks when there's roller coasters. People who are sirening, in a way, we call them sirens, without knowing that they're doing it, because they're not thinking about singing or making a note. They're just, woo! They have a wonderful release of airflow with an open throat, switching to head voice, and allowing the cords to stretch and thin without thinking of bracing. However, when we tend to sing and want to sing notes and pitches and rhythms, for some reason we disassociate that process. Well, we shouldn't. We shouldn't. We should think of why is it that when I'm not really even thinking about singing, I'm just having fun, I don't even care, it becomes very easy to access this part of my range, even if it is disconnected or in a falsetto position. But when I try to sing, I start to brace, I tense, and I get rigid. No one is bracing when they're just hollering and hooing and having fun. They're letting go. We want to replicate that in our singing, along with all the other concepts that I've talked about in my previous videos, of course. But this also is an integral part of the vocal technique process. Now, I'm currently doing lots of Traviata, to the point that I don't think I ever want to hear a theme of Traviata ever again in my life. The last 3 productions I've done have been Traviata. I think the next 2 or 3 are also going to be Traviata. And the more you do a role, you have to make it fun for you somehow. If not, it becomes just a nightmare of repeating things over and over again. And if I'm thinking of, for example, of Alfredo's Cabaletta, which is incredibly challenging. It's a huge technical piece, because you already have sung an aria in a fairly high tessitura and an uncomfortable tessitura for a lot of tenors. In the passaggio, that area where the voice wants to break or crack, if you don't allow it to turn by itself, by putting certain postures and motion already in place, which I have spoken about in other videos. Not only is it in a high tessitura, but then the cabaletta comes, which is in a higher tessitura, and everything is more forte, and it continues to shoot higher and higher. And I noticed the more and more that I do this, when I first started singing this cabaletta, there was a little bit of brace coming in, right? The words go, ma il turpe sono a frangere il vermi, brace, baleno, il vermi, right? There was a brace always, right? Because it's forte. The more I do it now, to the point that it just comes out naturally, but the more I notice that for me to feel comfortable in this piece and not slowly choke myself with this high tessitura, there's a mental decision that comes before the singing, especially before the high note. And this is very important. The quality of the high note is determined by the quality of sound from the previous note. And I would even go as far as to say from the previous phrase. So if I know that the phrase coming up is ma il turpe sono a frangere il vermi baleno, if I know that's the phrase that's coming, the high note is determined by how I start to sing il vermi, and especially by how I sing the note before it. And I find myself more and more when it goes well, that I am doing more of this process than the brace. Oh, that's how I picture it. Sighing into it. It's more of letting go than it is brace. Brace. There's more of that in the sound. I start to tune in more into this dummy voice, which again helps to stay in the tilt, helps to integrate head voice, stimulates and aids the idea of stretching and thinning the vocal cords, and continues to elongate the vocal tract. So the idea behind these valvula exercises that have to do with the idea of Melocchi teaching the and Caruso scales that start with and end with as you ascend. It's not so much about the vowel as it is about the process that the vowel aids in emulating, which is elongating the vocal tract. So Caruso would start his low notes or his scale with a. As he ascends to the middle of his voice, starts to change to o, and as the higher he goes, o. Kind of like a cat. Meow, 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 meow. Now, if you take it literal and you're just singing it's not going to do anything, right? Because you're just doing the vowel. And that's not the idea behind the concept. The concept of o, and then eventually is what's happening internally, which is what we tend to dismiss or neglect. We're always going for the literal definition, for the result. No. Internally, the process of is we're elongating the vocal tract as we ascend in order to allow the voice to turn or cover by itself. And this seems to be a pattern in singing. The moment you do something or you try to generate an action from your voice is the moment it goes wrong. When you are covering, it's a forced cover. You're forcing it. When you allow the voice to turn because you are maintaining a posture and you're leaning on the breath, which is the true definition of appoggio, instead of supporting or engaging, you're leaning on it, which really is big fancy talk for aspirating, right? It's a release of airflow that's intense. There's your lean. And then you open the throat, raising the soft palate, lowering the larynx, getting into your position, your dummy voice, and without corrupting that process, allowing the breath to continue to flow while maintaining the posture. And things will happen by themselves if you let go instead of brace. Let it go here, let it go here, blah, 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 blah. Let it go here. This should never be flexed. It's a springboard. It's stretchy. You're ascending. It should be bouncy, like you're in one of those big yoga balls and you're bound. This is the idea that we want when we sing. This is liberating. This is a quality of sound that will allow you to meet the high demands of the tenor voice, in which you're constantly singing these crazy high notes that are unnatural to the male voice, that we have to go through a process to reach them in a healthy manner, while also singing in a high tessitura and in an uncomfortably high position, while also acting, stage fighting, doing the blocking, wearing crazy costumes, doing cartwheels and singing in awkward positions. Make it easy for yourself. Stop trying to emulate other singers. And even if you are trying to emulate these big, heroic singers, funny enough, they did it the same way. They didn't make it hard for themselves. They found a way to release the sound, which is why it's a big resonant sound, because it's not tense. It's not blocked. It's not braced. There's also ways of working this into your singing as well. I see a lot of videos, for example, of a teacher who's telling a singer to sing while leaning on a wall. Let's demonstrate this. Okay, so I'm in my wall, okay? I'm putting my back against my wall. I'm in a comfortable position. You don't need to overly squat, as that will start to bring tension, and your thighs are definitely gonna start shaking on you. Comfortable, comfortable. Feel quite bouncy, shoulders are free of tension. Now, this position can help with a couple of different things. First of all, it keeps your back, your spine in a, for the most part, straight upwards manner. You're not collapsed. You should never sing like this. You should also never sing overarched. Too much. That's exaggerated. No. You can think of military position, keeping your chest up. One of my favorites are also touching the back of the hands together like this, bringing the intercostals out, and then just slowly bringing the arms down without changing the posture of the body. And there you go. There's your singing position. Don't do this. Now, keep it straight. And the idea behind the wall is that it also keeps your spine straight, keeps your chest up. Great. Okay. So what I want you to now start to think is, as you pick a musical phrase or a scale or a piece from an aria, as you ascend, instead of bracing, I want you to give in more into this wall. Give in more into it. Almost sit on it. Put your weight on the wall. If you want to do a little swivel as you start your scale a little bit more forward, never collapse, but just a little bit forward, and put the weight on it. You can also start standing, and as you ascend, kind of like a trust fall, you're putting your weight on the wall. Like that. Yeah. And play around with the idea of what I like to call throw the voice around. Like you're throwing a little ball, like a bouncy ball, and it's coming back at you. Don't be so worried about the quality of sound. Is it beautiful? Is it pretty? Just stay completely relaxed. Open. Have that position, right? And throw the voice around. It's an extension of this sigh while keeping the air vibrant, keeping the air flowing. Yes, the air comes into contact with the vocal cords. And yes, we don't want to just blow open the cords, which leads to leaky, breathy singing. Course, that's not the outcome, and that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the sensation should never feel one of a blocked stream of airflow. It should feel like this continuous flow is never stopped. It's coming into contact with the vocal cords as they start to begin vibration. You feel the vibration in your open throat, in your open cavity, as it bounces in that cavity, chambers of resonance, and flows. It's never a punch. Never punched. It's always arrived in a very caressful, gentle manner. The flow of air is intense, but this stays relatively loose. Again, spring-like, bouncy. It's not a flex. It's the intensity of the airflow that should not be lazy, because that is where you lean on, if that makes sense. Obviously, when you sing, there's not going to be a wall. You're by yourself. So where is your wall? It's that intensity of airflow that you're leaning on. That intensity should always continue. It can't be lazy, because then you don't have anything to lean on, and what do? You brace. We're always trying to find some sort of grounding in our singing, some sort of control. And we'll usually turn to bracing for it, where it should be the opposite. Let go of the idea of a physical action for the result. You won't get there that way. The result will come from a function, a process. And it's trusting that if you follow the process and you maintain this correct posture, which should happen after every single inhalation, every rest that you have in your area where you take a breath, that's when the onset happens. That's when you prepare, open the throat, get into your tilt, and leaning on the breath, the aspiration, sul fiato. And you're in this flexible sound. All the way in the top, it becomes very thin, very close to our roller coaster sensation. Woo! Except that compared to falsetto, which is what that was, there is a filo, a string of connection to the chest voice. And that's what it, again, should feel. It should be a string. It's not overly done. If you try to connect to the chest voice in an aggressive or in an overdone manner, then you are thickening the vocal cords and you're not allowing the stretch to happen to its best overall ability. There's a little string there that's allowing me to stay in the full voice without just flipping. That's flipped. That's flipped into falsetto. There's a string that we need to access. It's very thin. That helps us to stay tethered in the voice. So if that's my string, all I have to do now is maintain that connection and intensify it, not through bracing or muscularity or physical action, but through aspiration, through the intensity of the airflow. And it's this idea of leaning, appoggiando myself to the wall, or in this case, if I was doing it without a wall, leading to the idea of the intensity of the airflow and staying relaxed, trusting the process. You know, I often tell people to do physical activity before singing, cardiovascular exercise, things that involve jumping, running, jumping jacks, to emulate that idea of looseness, spring-like sensation. And once the body is getting used to doing this, then you start to bring in all these vocal technique concepts to that process. The opening of the throat, the stretching of the vocal cords, the sensations of this and that, and so on and so on and so on. But the voice is alive. It's an organism. It needs flexibility. If we lock it, even if it's the correct posture, but we lock the posture, we're going to be rigid. We're going to be bracing. We're going to be cutting the range. We're going to be cutting the process that allows us to continue to sing in a comfortable manner. And again, you can push through. You know, I have pushed through. There's been many days in which I have not been my best and I have pushed through. And you can do that, but if you get into the habit of doing that all the time, you're gonna have a short career. And you're gonna feel it after the end of every performance. You're gonna be like, oh my God, my voice feels like a brick. I can't even speak. Whereas you should come out of a performance still feeling pretty fresh. For those of you with jaw tension problems, things like massaging the jaw, finding this idea of unhinging the jaw, or even thinking that you don't have a bottom jaw at all, that you're singing as Salvatore Fisichella told me once, from here, up. so that you don't just have deepness. There's deep, but also deepness and height, which I talk a lot about in my laringe stretta video. Whereas the yawn is good to start off with, but the more advanced you get, you start to realize its flaws. The yawn can lead you to bracing because you continuously have built the habit of continuing to expand the vocal tract, always finding more space. And that's gonna work against you when it comes to high notes. We want the opposite. As we ascend, it's not about continuing to find more and more space. If anything, it's about biting the sound, finding a sensation of narrowing, the snarl, widening, and concentrating that open cavity of space instead of continuing to enlarge it. We don't want can't. We want which is a more narrowing sensation, and we can continue to ascend more comfortably. It's a lot of ideas being put together. This is why I've always advised pick one, isolate, master it, move on to the next, and then combine, move on to the next, and then combine that. It's a lot of take one step back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward. It's a slow, diligent path that requires a lot of discipline. So avoid the idea of bracing. Invite the idea of letting go. Listen to the great singers that put their money where their mouth is and have shown us how it's done. Listen to singers like Angelo Loforese, Gilli, Wunderlich, Björling, singers who have always avoided the path of tension, at least as much as they could, and have always opted for a more free, obstacle-less type of singing, if that's a word, free of obstacles, or without putting your own obstacles in the way. It's an extension of breathing. It's not without pressure, and I don't want to advertise the idea that singing is effortless or pressure-less. There is pressure. There will always be pressure involved because what we do is very unnatural. We're singing incredibly high notes tethered to the chest voice, but it's definitely manageable when you do it this way. And it can feel quite cathartic, therapeutic, released when done in this manner. So that's today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, share, like, subscribe, do all those things as that continues to help us to put out content. Since I am back now after a month of lots of stressful things happening, very busy month of things, I am looking to put out more content, even if it is shorter videos, challenges, bringing guests on board, and for my dear members of the channel, as I promised, more content for you guys, things such as challenges, concepts, one-on-ones, masterclasses, only for members only. So if that sort of thing interests you, become a member. The link is below in the description. Like I always say, these are my experiences, and this is knowledge that I share to all of you based on things that work for me and that I have found to be truthful, to function. If you disagree with me, no one's forcing you to do these things. If you have constructive information to add and knowledge that you would also want to share with the community, drop a comment below. And also let me know what you guys want to hear next. As always, continue working, continue practicing, the work continues. Ciao, ciao for now.